All right, here's 8-3 day 2. Here we're going to do the exact opposite of what we did in day 1, in the sense that before you had a trig function, you had the equation and you had to come up with the graph. You had to sketch a couple periods of the graph. Here's the opposite. We're going to start by looking at a graph, and you're going to write the equation according to what you see in the graph. A couple things I want to note here. Really, max, min, and the period are the key. All right, we're finding the same things. We got to find A, B, H, and K, but it really lies from the graph with finding the max, min, and the period. Let's do a couple examples. This one tells us right off the bat. Let's find a sine curve. All right. What that tells us right here is we are expecting this to start right in the middle. So I'm thinking of the first period starting right there. Like I said here, it's very important to identify maximum, minimum, and period. Okay. So it looks like right here that we have a max, looks to be at y equals 5. We've got a min right at y equals -1, okay? And the best way to get the period is to look at the distance between consecutive maximum points. Okay, it looks like right here I've got a max at x equals 3 and another one at x equals 11. Well, that would tell me that the period is 8. Okay, that's how I would always start, is maximum, minimum, period. Observe those from the graph. You saw on the previous slide that amplitude is max, which was 5, minus min over 2, which comes out to be 3. Okay. B, if we rearrange that equation that we had before, okay, which is that 2 pi divided by b is the period, we can actually algebraically rearrange that to say that 2 pi divided by the period is b. Well, in our case, that's 2 pi over 8, and that means that b is pi over 4. Okay, so there's A and B. H is our horizontal shift, and now what we're looking at here is where this first period starts, which we identified was right here at x equals 1. Okay, now if a sine curve hadn't been shifted at all, it would start at x equals 0, which means this has been shifted 1 unit to the right. Now we have an amplitude change here, so that can make the vertical shift a little bit tricky. What we really want to do is to focus on finding the middle of the graph. Okay, the very center. That's 3 units from the max and 3 units from the min, and yes, that's related to the fact that the amplitude is 3. And I can see that that line is right at y equals 2, which means the vertical shift has been 2. Because if that hadn't been shifted, that would be right at y equals 0. Okay? Put it all together. We've got y equals 3 sine of pi over 4 x minus 1 plus 2. We came up with the equation from the graph. Okay? Let's take a look at a second example. Here it just says trig function. Okay, it's kind of being a little coy with us, sine or cosine, and the answer is you could really do either. All right, what I want to say there is if you were to choose sine and identify that maximum point right there, you would have to incorporate a horizontal shift of 1. Okay, and in fact, let's just go with that. Let's write a cosine model. We could do, you know, if I started in the middle and went with a sine curve, there would be no horizontal shift, but let's go with cosine, just to do something different from the first one. Couple things to notice here. There is a maximum at y equals 7. There's a minimum at y equals 3. Okay? Distance between consecutive maximum points, that looks to be at x equals 1. and then up to x equals 5, which means the period is 4. Just like before, we need A, we need B, we need H, and we need K. Amplitude is always max minus min over 2. That's why we want to identify those points, is because it makes the amplitude relatively easy to find. Again, B is 2 pi over the period, which we identified as 4, which means our value for B, our horizontal stretch, is pi over 2. We had already talked about how the horizontal shift is 1. And it looks like the horizontal middle of the graph is right at y equals 5, which would imply that this graph has been shifted up 5 units. Y equals 2 cosine of pi over 2 times x minus 1 plus 5. Okay? That's all you're going to see in 8.3 day 2, coming up with the equation from the graph. Okay, just to summarize here, it's all about finding A, B, H, and K, but first, observe from your graph what is the max, what is the min, and what is the period. Okay, start with those 3 things. All right, as always, if you have questions, let's talk more in class.